So I decided this year to read some like romantasy stuff, and I don't think I could really do that without diving into something like Outlander. It turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I could end that phrase with just, I don't think I could do that. But I'm glad you enjoyed it, and we'll see what people think. Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. Zach's here to give his spoiler-light reaction to Outlander.
And
It
I'm sorry.
belongs here on this channel because it is fantasy fiction.
Absolutely.
With a leaning towards historical fantasy.
Yeah.
It's romantasy, as you said. So this is definitely the first episode dedicated to romantasy on Fantasy for the Ages.
Is it really? We haven't done any before this?
And it might be the last.
It won't be the last. It'll just be the last maybe that you have any idea what's going on, because you know that a show exists about this.
Yes.
It's very popular.
Oh, yes. And both your mother and your sister have watched and enjoyed. And I think they've both read. I know your mother read this.
I mean, I'd even say I might get crucified by our Wheel of Time audience. And as much as I love the Wheel of Time, Outlander is probably the next most successful fantasy book-based show after Game of Thrones.
I just want to know why, Zach. Why did you feel compelled to read Outlander?
Because unlike you, I'm not allergic to romance. I do sometimes enjoy that in my books, and so this year I kind of was like, let's start reading more romance, maybe even some smutty things here and there. I don't really care what I'm exposing myself to, save for the fact that I want a different reading experience than I sometimes do. I don't just want to go off of epic fantasy recommendations that you have for me, but let's try some other things. And so I was sitting at a point going, I have some Audible credits and I don't know what I'm reading next. And well, Outlander's here. And that's a lot of books, and they're long books.
Kudos to you. You are broadening your perspective with reading. And yeah, no problem. Props to you, but Outlander. So what did you think? Was it worthwhile?
I enjoyed it. I found myself wanting to emulate, partially because I was doing the audiobook, a Scottish accent at times, and going, no, Zach, stop. You can't speak in accents. Don't do it.
Don't go there.
But it was really fun to be able to immerse myself in that world. It was a very compelling story with interesting characters. And yeah, there are absolutely times and sections of the book that are dedicated to kind of a deepening of a relationship between characters, and especially between two in a romantic context, including some not quite fade to black scenes. I enjoyed it. You would hate it.
Now, time travel is an aspect of this story, right?
Yes, it is. It initially takes place with a couple of chapters and stuff set in just after World War II.
Okay.
And then jumps back about 200 years, as in one of those characters from the 1940s.
So we're in the
1700s. Back about 200 years, like 1743.
Okay.
I think it's where we actually end up picking up.
And in Scotland, you were saying. Okay.
There's some travel around and different things, but it largely takes place in Scotland, with conflict a little bit between the Scots and English, and this idea of the Jacobites, and a whole historical thing that I don't know well enough to know how accurate this story is, which is probably a good thing, because I just got to sit back and enjoy it for what the story it was telling was, not for historical accuracies or lack thereof.
Sure. So aside from apparently enjoying a little bit of smut, what aspects of this story worked for you?
There were a lot of really well developed and written characters, as well as, while not necessarily like completely unexpected plot, well thought out and executed plot. There definitely were things where you don't necessarily see that coming, but it wasn't written to be for shock value. Rather, it was written to make sense of, oh, that's how that connects, and yes, that makes sense. And seeing some of the hardships that characters go through, the way that they have to engage with it, getting to enjoy the very human experiences that these people go through and kind of explore that yourself vicariously was very nice. And from another perspective, it was really nice to see something that was fantasy, but felt more like it was written with the female gaze in mind.
Okay.
Far too often in media, fantasy and sci-fi.
Female gaze. So she's constantly checking out the men and their physiques.
That's not at all what that means. At all.
Well,
from a media
when you say the male gaze, we know what that means. Why is the female gaze not the exact opposite?
Because the exact way that you're talking about that is not the exact opposite. It is still the male gaze, but viewed from the idea of women view men the same way. That's not necessarily true. The idea of these concepts is how a man sees the world and how a woman sees the world, kind of thing. And the things that these gender dynamics seem to focus on the things that you value. It's not that, oh, that big hunky man is what's hot.
A woman can be guilty of the male gaze if she's staring and objectifying the men she sees?
Yes and no. Objectification isn't necessarily just a male thing, nor is it a male gaze thing. I'm not well-versed and nuanced in this enough to teach you the difference between a male and female gaze, but I am familiar enough to recognize that this isn't the male gaze.
Okay, tangent course correction. Now back to the story.
And so just because so much fantasy and sci-fi does come from that perspective and often doesn't have very well written or thought out female characters, it was nice seeing a different side of that and getting to explore that further in still a large tome. These books that are big and are going to, the series is 9 books long, and I'm going to invest in that. Okay. I've enjoyed it. I'll read the next one.
All right.
I've already got it downloaded. I just haven't listened to it yet.
Okay, very good. Out of 5 stars, what would you give Outlander?
Like a 4 plus.
Okay.
I don't know where above a 4. It's definitely solid. It wasn't like my version of a peak book, but I did really enjoy it, and I'm gonna read the rest of the series, kind of thing. So at least a 4.
And you have, agreed that it's probably not my kind of thing.
No.
Whose kind of thing would it be?
A lot of people. I think it's a really well.
People.
Here's the thing. I think it is a really, really well done book. It's a good story. It's engaging. It's interesting. Characters are compelling. But if sex and romance is not something you want to see in your fantasy book, then don't read this book. It doesn't focus on that. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for a smutty book, that's not this either. But if you do want romance to be a significant plot point, not just something that's brushed off to the side and it's there because it has to be there, but it's not something we're going to focus on, this is a great book for it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Any last words you want to say on Outlander? That sounded pretty good right there. But
I had tried the show at one point, and I don't have enough time that I spend watching TV shows. After reading the book, I think I'm more interested to go back in and watch it more because it seemed like it was doing a pretty good job as an adaptation.
Okay. Well, very good then. There you go, everybody. If you liked Zach's thoughts on this, be sure to like our episode, and we'd love to have you as a subscriber if you haven't yet joined. If you have comments for Zach on Outlander or comments for my off-the-wall comments, that's what the comment box is for. Go ahead and use it. And down in the show notes, you can find the ways you can interact with Zach and I outside of YouTube, social media, our Discord server. There's an invite link down below, even our Patreon page. Check it out, and we thank and appreciate all of you who support us on Patreon. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.